You're listening to LeaderCast, episode 34. Welcome to LeaderCast, Transforming Missions podcast with Tim and Sara Thomas, providing you with insights and resources you need to lead a movement of Jesus followers. A couple of weeks ago, we were doing an episode around coaching, and I asked Tim, what he wanted to be coached on, and we ended up having a coaching conversation around focusing on a specific period of time that we were in around charge conferences. So we wanted to do a bit of a follow-up to that, and then we're going to head into some conversation around planning for 2019. So first, Tim, tell us, what was the conversation that we had, and what ended up happening with what you were seeking to focus on?
Well, you were asking me to about the goal for Charge Conference, and I think I remember telling you, if our conversation went the way I remember it, was that around two things. One is we were facing some uncertain times in the United Methodist Church, and I wanted to help our leaders have some focus in the midst of that uncertainty. And the other thing that we wanted to do was to establish some coaching cohorts. So as we move into the future with the United Methodist Church, we could help our pastors address some of the issues or being able to adapt to some of the challenges that might come before us. So I certainly felt like I accomplished part of that, and that was I preached facing the future with hope. I think what I would want to say to the people listening is that somewhere in the middle of 7 charge conferences where I used this facing the future with hope, I made a shift. And part of that shift was what was being said. Number one, wasn't necessarily addressing what I wanted to address. And number two, what it was, the images that were being used certainly were not the kind of images that I wanted to use for facing the future with hope. So I made some shifts at that point. It remains to be seen whether there'll be any dramatic change. Don't know that I was expecting that. What I wanted to do was to help our leaders, both lay and clergy, to be able to face the uncertain times with some kind of confidence, with some kind of hope. The other thing was beginning to encourage some pastors to step into coaching. We spent some time talking about coaching, and I think, at least from my perspective, we were successful. If success is that we had people sign up, that we had at least 20% of the pastors of the district say that they wanted some kind of coaching, and that coaching means that we come alongside them to help them be the people, the leaders that they're capable of being. So, Coach, you did a good job as far as I'm concerned. You asked me what I needed to do. You have now asked me how it's turned out, and as far as I'm concerned, I whether it's been exactly the way I wanted it to or not, I feel good about where I am and what the future might hold.
And so that whole experience led us to thinking about 2019, because what you really established at Charge Conference was a setting of the tone for how we were going to lead into 2019, given some of the uncertainty that we are facing. And so I celebrate the fact that you were able to, in the midst of a lot of things happening all at the same time, see a need and see where there was a disconnect, and you were able to shift and continue moving forward so that your message might be heard in a different way. What you demonstrated there to to me, if I can just take a moment to celebrate you and your leadership, is the ability to adapt in the midst of what could have been a canned presentation, if you will, because you were doing it so many times. You didn't. You were able to adapt and continue to refine it as the weeks went on and as you met with each one of the groups. And as I have jokingly said to all of the people that I have spoken with, as I've been following up around the coaching cohorts and listening to folks to hear what they're anticipating, what they're looking for, what their needs are in the midst of wanting to be a part of coaching. What I've said to everyone is my hope was that we might have 2 groups realistically. And it's looking like we're going to end up having 9 coaching cohorts that will be meeting throughout the first 5 months of next year. So I celebrate that as we're stepping into this, those are amazing things.
One of the things that you've helped me think differently about, though, even though I think we can feel good about what we've done, is it's not really in the numbers. For me, it was successful in the sense that I could make a change, looking for a model for what we were talking about. The change actually gave us a very clear model for stepping into the future. And you've been modeling that as a coach. I think those 2 things are as important as many people as we might have participating. I just see the transformation and the and living into the mission of the district coming much more quickly because we have more people willing to step into it.
Yeah, and I think the only reason I mentioned my expectation and what is ending up happening, there is a deep desire for folks to be on this journey together and to have other people that are walking with them, especially in times of uncertainty. And providing the coaching cohorts is giving folks an opportunity to step into that. And I think I underestimated what the need was for that. I'm honestly blown away by what the response has been. I don't say this because it's a bad thing. I say it because it's a reality. I've had to shift my schedule for the first half of 2019 so that we can make this happen. And that's a good thing in my mind. But that's the reality of what it has meant for us. So
in our planning, when we say, when you aim at nothing, you usually hit it. This has allowed us to know that maybe what our aim was has been right on, and that what we're ready to step into, I think, will be very helpful for folks as we step into whether it's the uncertain times, whether it's in giving leadership at any point in time in terms of our ministries. I think we're at a good place for what we're about to do.
I would agree.
Okay, well, let's do it.
So to take this whole conversation of what's ahead in 2019 just a step further, we want to walk with you through some focus areas that we've made some decisions around. There's really not any change. It's more of a reminding you of why we do this podcast, why we have the blog, and how the resources of Transforming Missions seek to serve you as a leader. So Tim, remind us, what's our focus?
Yeah, our focus has been from the very beginning to equip people to lead a movement of Jesus followers. Sometimes that, whatever it takes to lead that movement, is what we've been talking about. We now want to be clearly focused on how that might happen over this next year.
And so we did a little bit of planning, had a couple-hour conversation around where we where we thought that was going. Didn't always agree on where it was going or how it should be said or where we should focus. But I think we've landed somewhere. So let me pause for just a second, because part of what I've briefly reflected on, because it hasn't been too long since we had that conversation that we're now recording this podcast, is that we started something new, and that was this podcast. And so that has provided us with different opportunities and a different medium to communicate with all of you around. And anytime I have started something new, there's always a period of adjustment. You're figuring out what you're doing. You're learning how it needs to happen and what works and what doesn't. And we're still learning. We're still on that journey. As I think about where we are now, we're 34 episodes in. We've learned a little bit about the technology and how to make the recording happen and all of those things. And so now we're able to focus on really the content and the information that we want to be able to share with you. So when we talk about leading a movement of Jesus followers, where we started with that was in thinking about it in terms of 3 or 4 different buckets of different types of leadership.
Yeah, yes, that's we were thinking about different kinds of leadership because we're talking about leading a movement of Jesus followers. So what kind of leaders, or what do leaders need to lead that movement? And that's where our conversation began, knowing that where we're going is transformation. So what does transformational leadership look like?
Right. And so that was where we really started to get some traction around what is it that we want to focus on and what is it that we want to talk about as we're doing these podcasts. I think what we really tried to do was ask the question, what does a leader need to be focused on if they're going to lead that transformation?
That's where most of our conversation was. And as you might know, and of course, this is where you are too, we always start with why we do this or what our purpose is. And as we talk about it from Transforming Mission, it is to equip leaders to lead a movement of Jesus followers. It's discipling people for the transformation of the world. It is helping people become who God created them to be so the world can be as God intended the world to be. That's really the overarching piece that we live with.
So I'm going to play with you here for a second. You just named our purpose in 3 different ways. Which one is it?
Well, for this purpose right here, it's to lead a movement of Jesus followers. Ultimately, it's for the transformation of the world.
So once we were able to say we want to focus on transformational leadership, then we had these 2 other categories of leadership. And I think at that point, after we had brainstormed a few ideas around what does it mean to be a transformational leader and what might we talk about, then we shifted and said, no, transformation is the outcome that we're seeking to find. But if we wanted to create some categories around what are we going to be focusing on, transformational leadership is probably too broad and probably encompasses more than, isn't really a category. It's the whole thing.
It's the whole thing, and it's not, for our purposes, it's not specific enough for what we need to do. I mean, you just continue to throw something up there, you're aiming at nothing. You're aiming at transformation, but if you just throw it out there, what do we need to do to bring about that transformation? Where do we need to focus? And you were very good at kind of honing in on the kind of focus that we needed to have. What are the shifts that need to take place for that transformation to take place?
So we identified 3 primary categories that we wanted to focus on. We'll get into the shift that is involved in getting there as we get into future episodes, probably in 2019. But for now, we simply wanted to outline for you the 3 big areas.
Some of them, Sarah, I think some of these shifts, I don't think anyone will disagree, but I think they'll be difficult for us to step into. But let's begin
I didn't say that just because they're necessary, it was easy.
Well, I don't know that you said anything about it being easy. I just wanted people to sit back and get ready to listen to what we understand might be the target we need to be shooting for.
The first one is people development. We're going to focus on developing people and helping people to grow as followers of Jesus. And so in as many different ways as you can think about that was one area of focus. The second area of focus was around being focused externally, focused on the things that are happening beyond the church walls and the people who are beyond the church walls.
And that wouldn't be anything new from what we've been talking about already, because we continue to talk about being related to the community and understanding the needs of the community in the larger context on how we then are in ministry beyond ourselves.
And the third big area was around contextual or kingdom-based leadership. So taking into account your specific context and the needs and the assets that are happening around you, helping folks to focus in on really the leader development piece of that.
We're not talking about making church leaders. We're talking about making kingdom leaders in the context in which they're located.
Often in the life of the church, when it came time for nominations and looking for leaders in the life of the church, there's a group of people that would sit around and say, who could fill that spot? Folks, that's not leadership development. So when we talk about leader development and contextual leadership development, we're talking about helping people to lead their families well, helping people to be a Christian leader in their place of work, helping people to lead well in the context that you live in. So that might mean, being in relationship with your police chief or your fire chief, that we're going to need to help people learn how to do that and to do that well. And that has not been, in my experience, and that's all that I can offer, that has not been a focus for the church. We have focused on helping people to lead within the church. And so we're going to push some boundaries and invite folks to help develop people that are, I don't like the word well-rounded, but maybe a holistic leader is another way to say it.
So if we're people-focused and developing people to become who God created them to be, or to use the strengths, the abilities they have to live their life to their fullest, that becomes, it's necessary then to become focused beyond ourselves for the purpose of the transformation of the world. That's what we're really talking about. The focus then is, if it's externally focused, we need to have people who understand that who they are as followers of Jesus Christ is lived out in every context, in every way. So as we grow as kingdom people, or as kingdom leaders, or leaders within a certain context, it's not something that we add to our lives. It becomes who we are. And that's really what we're about.
And that was the fourth area that we said that we were going to focus on. And it's really around self-leadership. That who are you as a leader? And how are you going about leading? Because if you're not focused on developing people, if you're not focused on the folks who are beyond the church walls, if you're not focused on the kingdom of God, the people that you're leading in your local church, the people that you are helping to grow as leaders are not going to be focused on it either. And so that's the other aspect that we'll be talking about in the new year. We've already talked about all of these. We're just getting clear in terms of how we want to help you all lead well. There was one other little nuance that we came up with in terms of how we want to share things with you in 2019. We probably should put this episode out as the last episode of the year, but you're getting it early. And that was really around what type of challenge is it and how can we resource you best for that challenge? What I mean by that is as we think about each one of these three categories, there are four. As we think about these four categories, self-leadership, people development, externally focused, and kingdom or contextual leadership, each one of those have elements that really have a technical or tactical challenge to it, a strategic challenge, or an adaptive challenge to it. And so we will offer different aspects of each one of those. So sometimes we'll be offering a how-to. So when it comes to being externally focused, we might do a podcast next year around how to do a prayer walk in your local community and give you resources to be able to do that. That would be a tactical approach to an external focus that we hope to resource you with. An adaptive challenge in the midst of that might be your community's changing. And how do you step into building those relationships with people? And so we might have a conversation about that, and we won't end up having answers because with adaptive challenges, you're going to end up managing the tension between two different things and stepping into that. And so that will be part of what we're talking about. Or it might be more strategically based, like this conversation that we're having. Where are you going? What's the focus going to be? And why is that where you're heading?
So I don't know that there's anything else to be said about that. Each of those areas that we've brought about, whether it's people development, being externally focused, kingdom leadership, our own self-leadership, each of those areas, there's a place for skill, there's a place for strategy, there's a place for understanding the challenge that we need to meet, adaptive challenge. So as we step into the new year, that's the focus we're going to have, and trying to meet the need in an uncertain time. But also, it doesn't make any difference what the time is. God's love for us in Jesus is the same always, and how we experience that love and how we share that love in any given time and place in history depends on how we are living in that context and how we are understanding ourselves. That's part of what I've learned with the coaching piece, Sarah, that you've offered, and hopefully we'll have pastors learn that as well, is that as they become more aware of themselves and the gifts that they have, the strengths that they have, they're able to step into leadership with greater courage and with greater focus and strength, because then it's not trying to be somebody they're not. as much as it is living into who they really are, which gives them the kind of confidence that they need. So that's part of what we're trying to do too.
Yes.
There's not a pill to take. There isn't a program to learn. There's nothing that can be given to make things different other than trusting who God has created us to be and loving as God has loved us in Jesus. Those two things will get us to the place of courageous leadership. And part of what all this is understanding who we are as individuals in relationship to a larger community. And how do we lead that community to be who God would have us be at this point in time in history? I just keep talking around it, but that's what we're talking about.
And so part of what you just identified, and honestly, I hadn't thought about it this way, but it's absolutely true, is the self-leadership piece is where coaching falls. Coaching is about helping you develop as a leader. And so it's gaining greater self-awareness, being able to claim the reality of who you are in Christ, and then applying the gifts and the graces that you have to the leadership challenge before you. And so as we step into 2019, we've given you a little bit of a tease in this episode of where we're heading. So here's what we're going to do. As we get into 2019, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what would be most helpful for you as a leader. So if you have not already signed up to be a LeaderCast Insider, we invite you to do that, because that will be the way that we'll communicate with you with a very brief, if you want to call it a survey, feedback form, whatever word you would like to use, when we hit the new year, so that you can help us get a sense of where's the greatest need and the greatest focus. We certainly have our thoughts and our opinions on where that will be. But we've now given you 4 broad areas that we're going to focus on, and would invite you to be praying and reflecting on those big areas in your own leadership as we conclude 2018 and head into 2019. And if you're listening to this at a different date, so wherever you find yourself, we invite you to reflect on the four areas that we'll be focusing on and leading you through in the new year: self-leadership, people development, and external focus, and kingdom and/or contextual leadership. So if you'd like to sign up to be a LeaderCast Insider, you can find a place to do that at transformingmission.org/podcast, or on the show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/034. Tim, do you have any final thoughts for us?
We've got some good things coming, and look forward to sharing with folks in the days ahead.
And with that, I'll wrap us up, as I often do, by saying, go lead a movement of Jesus followers. Bye for now.